On today's episode of the podcast, we're talking about your strengths. What are you good at? Where do you shine? And how can you cultivate a life that lets you live in your strengths rather than trying to be someone you're not? That's what we're talking about on today's show. And welcome to the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. If you're a growth-oriented person on a mission to create more love, happiness, and success in your life, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. I'm the founder of Growing Self Counseling and Coaching. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, a licensed psychologist, a certified coach, and most importantly, your partner in growth every week on this show. I love doing this with you. And hey, on that note, thank you so much for getting in touch with me on Instagram. I've gotten so many fun messages from you guys showing up with questions, with comments, with things you want to hear more about, which I love because I'm making these shows for you. And so I really appreciate your staying in touch with me to let me know what's important to you. If you want to get in on this conversation, come find me, Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby on Instagram, because we're doing this together. But on today's episode, we're going to be talking about your strengths. And if you're a regular listener, you know that I'm all about personal growth. And when we're talking about growth, we're usually talking about the things that we want to improve, develop in ourselves. So areas where we feel like we have room for improvement, but it's also wise to think about the things that are natural strengths that come easily for you, and to think about how you can design your life in a way that takes advantage of these strengths. That is also a very important path of growth, possibly the most powerful one of all. Because the reality, right, is that nobody is good at everything. And if you believe you should be good at everything, your life is always going to feel like you're swimming upstream. This is very apparent when it comes to many domains of life, including relationships, but also when it comes to career choices, as well as just in how we operate throughout our lives, right? We can all contribute so much more to the world and have a lot more fun doing it when we are operating from our true strengths and like appreciating those parts of ourselves. So let's dive in. Let's begin at the very beginning and talk about what are personal strengths. When I think of personal strengths, I think of them as being these unique qualities that make each of us not just special, but like exceptional in our own way. These strengths can define our abilities, our potential, but also create clarity around the distinct value that we can bring into the world. So before we move on, I would like for you to think just for a minute about what makes you special and different, because each of us possesses a set of strengths that distinguishes us from others. These strengths are the secret sauce of our individuality, and I will give you a tip. If you're having trouble thinking about what your strengths are or identifying those, one thing that you might consider are the aspects of yourself that you actually don't like that much. Parts of yourself that you consider to be weaknesses. Believe it or not, you may find that these weaknesses, the things you don't like, are actually the flip side of a strength that you possess. Because all personal qualities, everything, has pros and cons. There is light and dark in all things. So two sides of the same coin. So for example, if you believe that you're someone who feels insecure, kind of shy, doesn't like to start conversations, or doesn't know what to say when you're talking to people that you don't know very well, I would bet that you might also be a really good listener, that you are actually more interested in what other people have to say than you are in talking about yourself. So that might be a flip side of something that you think of as being a problem. Um, a way to reframe this is being a good listener. One who seeks to understand the experience of others is, by many people's definitions, actually, an enormous source of strength. So, you might even want to pause this podcast here for a second, put my life coaching hat on, and turn this into an action-oriented thing for you. Sit down and make a list. All the things that you either know and appreciate about yourself already as being strengths, or things that you don't like about yourself. Go ahead, make that list. And then once you do, I'd like to invite you to think about what the flip side of those coins might be, because that will help you start to get clarity about what maybe your superpowers actually are. So another thing that we should talk about is this common misconception about strengths. Going back to this idea about there being light and dark in all things, is this myth in our society that we should be good at everything. These are very perfectionistic ideas, and that anything that we identify within ourselves as not being a strength, right, is a problem that must be fixed. This idea is not only wrong, it is one that often leads us to self-doubt, frustration, even low self-esteem, because the problem with this idea is that there are limits to what we can actually change about ourselves. Despite what many people in the personal growth space that I too inhabit, but what they would have you believe, I am your friend, I would never lie to you, and the truth is, we really need to pick our battles when it comes to the hard work of change, and seek to create change from within a position of strength, rather than having unrealistic expectations about ourselves and like who or what we should be that only create pain and disappointment. It is truly much more productive to cultivate self-acceptance here. So for example, if you want to get in shape, be healthier, but you hate running and you always have, don't start training for a marathon. Don't buy into this idea that you should be the type of person who goes on runs, or even like high impact exercise might not be your thing. There are many different paths to health in our example, and I would instead invite you to think about something that actually feels enjoyable and invigorating for you to do instead. So maybe you like swimming or yoga or going on walks in the woods, shopping, walking into different stores and looking at stuff. I don't know, like being with friends, having it turn into a social activity, whatever it is. If you've decided that having more exercise in your life is an important pillar of health for you, as it is for many people, it is completely unproductive to beat yourself up about not doing it the way you think you should do. Do not buy a gym membership. Find a middle path that's actually congruent with who you are. It makes it more likely that you will not just stick to your exercise habit for long enough to get in shape if you're focusing on your strengths. It also helps you shape a more positive identity. I am the kind of person who values being outside and going on hikes and being in nature. That's really positive. You just amplified your own power, your personal signature right there, as opposed to, beating yourself up for not being the kind of person that goes to the gym or runs or whatever. So that's kind of how this works. Relationships are similar. Many couples can get stuck because they believe that their partner needs to change so that they can have a better relationship, or that they need to change in some fundamental way in order to have a better relationship. In reality, the way this works is that your relationship will always improve when you can both start accepting each other and appreciating each other exactly the way you are, and work on identifying and cultivating your relationship's strengths instead. It's shifting our focus away from, problems into, let's talk about what's good here, what I appreciate and like about you. Yeah, you're a slob. And you're kind of a lot of fun. And I really like that about you. We can find a middle path to, create an environment that feels good for both of us. But here's when I have the most fun with you. And how can we do more of that? That is not my opinion, by the way. It's borne out by research from Dr. John Gottman and the Gottman Institute, which has done just phenomenal work around, big data, looking at lots of couples, lots of patterns, and seeing that the couples who are happiest and have the best outcomes and also more relationship satisfaction are the ones who practice these kinds of ideas that I'm talking with you about. So, understanding this and reframing this is the most important point. There are pros and cons of every way of being, even the things that we think about as being inspiring, right? The kind of person we want to be. If, for example, you want to be the kind of person that is always organized, very neat, very tidy, puts things away, clean car, knows where their stuff is all the time, that's great, particularly if it is a natural strength for you. But also understand that all ways of being have light and dark. That same person that you're like, I wish I was more like them, they might also really struggle when things are a little bit chaotic, when things do get messy. It may create a lot of anxiety within them. They may have a hard time functioning when things feel a little bit like a mess. In contrast, if you're somebody who is much more comfortable with some unknowns, a little bit of chaos in your life, you're going to be more adaptable to being okay, even if things aren't perfectly perfect. That's a strength. So my point here is don't over-index things, and also understand that every personality trait comes with darkness and light in it. And so before we go like idealizing other people because they have different strengths than we do, it's easy to get bought into this idea of, oh, maybe this person is better than me because they're this way and I'm that way. Think about, they have their own battles to fight. Maybe it's like a different flavor, but they still have their own growth work to do. And instead, shift back to yourself and your strengths. Maybe you understand very well what the cons are, what the dark sides are about your way of being. But have you really put the time and energy and thought into considering the possibilities and the superpowers that come from your natural way of being, as opposed to trying to like reshape yourself? So these are examples, what we're talking about, of some of the self-limiting beliefs that can get in the way of our understanding, identifying, and certainly embracing our own strengths. So I'll just share some examples from my own life, discussing both my strengths and my areas where I struggle, because they are two sides of the same coin for me too. So some of my strengths, right? I am insightful, curious, intellectual. I like learning. I'm also a huge believer in growth and development. I see possibilities, right? I see what it could be. And I am relatively confident. I'm ambitious. I am full of great ideas. So it's not just that I have ideas. I think we should do that. And that makes me very well suited to be a change agent in my life, in lives of others. I also have a tendency to be very flexible. I'm comfortable with ambiguity, which makes me really able to like walk into other people's worldviews and not just understand them, but like really get them. I can totally see the world through somebody else's eyes very easily. I also tend to prioritize relationships. I care a lot about other people. I have kind of peacemaker tendencies. Family therapists are aren't made, they're born, as the saying goes. So I've always been this way. But I do think I am empathetic. I can be compassionate, introspective. I like teaching. That's part of why I'm here. I like to learn things and then teach others about it. It's exciting for me. I like to write. I like to speak. I think I'm a creative person. I can visualize things, envision things, explain things. Big picture thinker, systems thinker, but I'm also like often prioritizing the thoughts and feelings of others. Like with these podcasts, I'm like, tell me what you would like to know about, as opposed to just having it be the Lisa show. So these are all things that I'm bringing to the table. I also tend to be present moment focused and also future oriented. So it makes me really good at being a therapist who specializes in coaching, all of the above. It makes me, I think, helpful, hopefully, for you as a podcast host, hopefully as a therapist and coach and couples counselor for the people that I seek to serve. But this also led me to start a private practice and believe that this was possible. And I'm a teacher of other therapists. I'm a clinical supervisor. I train therapists around how to practice the art and science of coaching psychology, which is a very different way of thinking about what we do. My way of being is congruent with entrepreneurship. I'm not telling you all this to make this about me, but these are all byproducts of the strengths that I know about, and they've led to good things in my life. I have a nice marriage. I've been married for a long time. I'm a wife and a mom, all good things. The business now has, we have 60 some therapists and coaches running around here. We're doing it. But before you think that I have all this all figured out and that, I have all these strengths, so therefore I'm not on the path of growth too, all of the things that I just told you about also make me have a tendency to overthink things. I can get overly detailed and granular. I can get kind of hyper-focused on different things and what's important versus what is not important in terms of information. Also, I think my flexibility, the other side of that, it can be difficult for me to have internal structure or boundaries. I have a weird relationship with time. I'm habitually late. I hate it. Other people hate it. I just, it's something that I've been working on forever, but I get really excited about what I'm working on. It's hard for me to stop. I also have a genuine hatred of most administrative tasks. So opening mail, responding to email sometimes, it's a problem. The other side of peacemaking, I think I've noticed in myself, I'm getting better with this, but I can be kind of avoidant when it comes to getting into situations that I'm worried could damage relationships. I have a tendency to soft pedal things, which can actually get in the way of healthy and productive communication. I don't like that. I have a tendency to over prioritize relationships and the comfiness of others, contributing to martyrdom that puts other people's thoughts and feelings over my own sometimes. I do that less now as I've been getting older, but that kind of people-pleasing thing has been a problem. I can also get kind of overwhelmed because I have so many things going on, so many ideas, get into this I'm too busy to do that right now. I'll do it later mentality, which turns into procrastination for me sometimes if I'm not careful. Let's see what else. Vulnerable to magical thinking, all kinds of stuff. And so again, not to make this all about me, but I just wanted to share transparently and authentically what this actually looks like. And I'm able to share this with you because I've done a fair amount of thinking about this, for myself, but also for others. And this is just two sides of the same coin. So when it comes to career paths, it would be really bad for me and anybody else in my orbit if I had selected a career path that required me to be different than who and what I really am. So for example, I was a biology major in college, in my undergrad, because I am a self-identified nerd. I love learning how things work. Was always fascinated just by like the mechanics of the human body, especially, but like how do plants work? How does photosynthesis work? For some reason, that was like super fascinating to me. And actually, at one point in my life, had some thoughts about like, oh, maybe I could go to medical school. And so, like many psychologists, bumped up against the wall of organic chemistry. So here I am. But really, to pursue that kind of career path, it would not have been good because I think it would require a level of planning, attention to detail, remembering details, being able to think about math on the fly, like all these kinds of things that would not have been easy for me to do and also would not have been in alignment with my strengths. I think there's a lot of room for empathy with physicians, but like I remember one experiment that I was unfortunately had to participate in where it involved the death of a rat, an experimental rat. And for days, I was like really bothered about this. And to be in a position of having to deal with, life and death every single day, I don't think that it would have been good for me mentally and emotionally. And I don't think that I would have really been of service to other people the way that they deserved. If you can't hold internal boundaries or get sidetracked or forget where you put things, like, terrible things can happen if you're a medical professional. What I did pursue is to think about, okay, well, what do I enjoy? What am I good at? What feels exciting to me that is actually intrinsic to my way of being? And how do we build on those things in a way that creates value in the lives of others? Because that is also a very important part of my being. I'm a values-based person, and it's extremely meaningful for me to be of service in the lives of other people. So that's an example. And again, I would invite you to ask yourself some of the same kinds of questions. Like, are there things that I should absolutely not be doing? Because whenever I try them, it doesn't go very well. Like my track record is this does not work for me. When I try to do certain kinds of things, what distracts me, what leads to poor outcomes, what feels like it's really difficult for me to do well compared to like what I see some other people doing with things, I'm still amazed at people who are just like so on top of little administrative tasks, answer an email within 2 minutes and like always know where the stuff is. Like, how do they do that? I'm not good at it. I have to accept that. Not that I can't work on it a little bit, but like, I'm not going to twist myself into pretzels to try to be somebody that I'm not. Instead, putting your energy into thinking about when I apply myself in these areas, where do I actually make magic happen for me or for others? And so I'll also share that if you have been in a life space where you've been struggling with this idea of self improvement or strengths, feeling pressure to be somebody that you're not, or struggling like with low self-esteem, feeling badly about yourself, it can be difficult to make contact with the parts of yourself that are really special and important. So if you have a background in clinical mental health, as I described my own strengths and limitations, you probably thought to yourself, that sounds a lot like ADHD. You would be right. I didn't actually figure this out until I was in my 30s, which was transformational for me, actually, because it gave me, I think, language and almost like an identity, a way of understanding myself differently than I had in the past. Because when I was younger, like in my 20s, I would just beat myself up. Like, what is wrong with me? Why is it so hard for me to do these things that seem like are so easy for other normal people to do? And I mean, I had a lot attached to that I needed to work through that obscured my ability to see and appreciate the parts of myself that really were gifts. not in spite of ADHD, but actually because of it. There are things that I believe I can do and that are strengths for me that other more neurotypical people would find challenging or would be less able to do than I am. So, that is this growth process. And so to be able to ask yourself these kinds of questions with the awareness that, especially if you've been beating yourself up for a while, the voice, the answer, like, where am I actually special and important? How do I make magic happen? That voice might be really quiet at first. And if it whispers and speaks up and, like, I'm actually really good at video games. Like, what? Okay, what is it about being really good at video games? I'm able to think strategically and solve problems and, like, figure things out. You may also immediately experience this other side, the should side that just jumps on that. And I'm like, let me tell you 87 reasons why that's dumb and why being good at video games is absolutely nothing to feel good about. But, like, we have to support that small, quiet voice around, how has this helped me understand the world, team dynamics, solving problems, getting things done? And how might this be a strength for me that I could actually potentially apply to other areas of my life? And how could this create a lot of value in the world or value for myself if I was able to develop this further? That's a really productive conversation to have with yourself. And another thing to consider while we're here is to be thinking about, what are the unavoidable things that I also need to do in order to have a functional existence? And how can I use my strengths to handle those well enough? So, not expecting perfection, not expecting that I'm going to grow into the type of person who can do these things and have a good time with them. But so, for example, one of my strengths, I am a flexible thinker, creative problem solver. I think strategically, I think systemically. And because of that, I have been able to develop systems that help me do the things that I need to do, opening the mail more easily than I would have otherwise. Laundry, administrative tasks, household tasks. It took a while to figure those out, managing my time and energy without, being swept away by whatever impulsive thought I'm excited about on any given day. Those are life skills that can be developed. And I think too, when we have clarity about the dark sides of our strengths, it also comes with a personal responsibility, right? An accountability. Like, now that I really know this about myself and how certain aspects of who I am can create problems in my life if I'm not actively managing them, what are the strategies that would help me actively manage them? Going a little bit more deeply into this, as we develop this ability to understand who we are, how we are, and the fact that we're multifaceted, right? All these things about ourselves have light and dark. Then we can begin what I think of as a really exciting journey around not just self discovery, but, like, self appreciation and also self support. So, for example, you know, and also the work that I've been talking about, like the questions that I've been asking you, this is not work that can be done in the context of listening to a podcast. These are starting point, entry level questions. There is a path of growth. This is a developmental process to work through all this stuff and come out the other side that takes a long time to do. It probably took me easily 10 years to work through some of the stuff that we're talking about today to get to where I am now. So I just wanted to say that out loud, because the last thing that I want to have happen to you is for you to, like, listen to this podcast and be talking about all this and to take away, like, oh, if I could just do this, then it would be okay. This should be easy. I am talking about these really major personal growth experiences with a lot of perspective and distance of somebody who has done them over the course of many years, someone who has been a guide walking people through this experience, and that it takes a long time for them to do it. My one-on-one therapy or really more coaching clients. So I just wanted to say that out loud to manage your expectations, because anybody who says, do this and it'll all fall into place, may have good intentions. And you just deserve to know it's a path of development is what we're embarking on, not flipping a switch. This is a process. So thank you. Getting off my soapbox now. But when you have done this work, or while you're in the process of doing this work, you can then begin thinking about what are the situations where I can see now that I was always setting myself up for failure. So many of these in my own life, like trying to operate without really solid time and task management systems, never worked. Going into a grocery store without a list, I am always setting myself up for failure. Either I will forget something important, or I will wind up buying things that I never needed, but wow, it's shiny. So it's like, what do I need to do? What are like my vulnerabilities, right? And thinking about, on the other side of this, what about my natural strengths are really valuable? Where can they create positive impact for myself or others? And here's the important part: how can I build a life and an identity around that? How can I become more of what I am and make magic happen because of that? That's a different line of thinking than what we're exposed to most of the time, particularly in childhood. If you had the benefit of especially like a conventional educational process that teaches towards the center. And as small children, we're trained from the beginning about how to be normal, how to be functional, what's good, what's bad. There's kind of that middle of the road value system that we're all measured against. Just transparently, one of the reasons that I chose to send my children to a Montessori school for not just preschool, but like the whole deal, Montessori through middle school, is because it is a model of education that is really all about helping kids understand who they are and developing that without coming at it from a lot of judgment about how they should be. It's really devoted to helping kids develop their strengths and also manage their vulnerabilities. So personal responsibility and accountability is also a cornerstone of the Montessori philosophy that I really appreciate, because that is also a crucial component of this. You're not doing yourself or anybody else any favors if you're saying to yourself or others, well, that's the way I am, so, whatever, and absolving yourself of the need to find a way of managing the vulnerabilities or the darker sides of your way of being. That's a cop-out. If you want to have a nice life, you can't do that either. We all deserve to be loved and respected and appreciated for who and what we are, but it's so disempowering to stop there. It limits you. It limits you. So being aware of your strengths and how they're valuable, but also really being aware of those vulnerabilities and having thoughtful strategies to manage those responsibly. So again, for me, organization systems, I need to spend time planning and cultivating energy. If I'm in a meeting, I need to take notes and write things down. I need routines. And so again, these are just examples from my life. What are they in your life? If you have the opposite kind of superpower, if you are somebody who's a planner, structured, organized, orderly, where you may run into trouble is in relationships. If you have a very well-developed idea of what should happen, when it should happen, how it should happen, you may experience yourself feeling angry, upset, frustrated when other people or other situations are not conforming to your very well developed ideas about what the correct way of being looks like. And in that case, I would invite you to think about, what are your strengths? Where can you amplify those? Go be a project manager. The world needs people like you. And how do you manage those tendencies, particularly interpersonally, and thoughtfully, in such a way that they don't cause problems in your life or wind up causing problems for other people? So this can take many, many different forms. And just remember, all strengths have a flip side, and all weaknesses also have a flip side. So when you get clear about all of those things through this, long-term process of growth and discovery, personal growth work, and being invested in it, you can begin to build a strengths-based life. If you're listening to this as a young person who's still, figuring out who and what you want to be in the world, that's fantastic that you're doing this kind of work now. And if you would like to continue building on this, my best big sisterly advice for you would be to get connected with a really good therapist who specializes in coaching, specifically career coaching. This is a unique breed of therapist. So what we're looking for here is a licensed therapist who has specialized education and training in career counseling and professional development, and who can apply it through a coaching framework. This is a unicorn a little bit. I mean, this is what we do at Growing Self, which is part of why my practice is as special as it is because of this, strange kind of constellation of specialties when it comes to career counseling. But as an early career person, somebody who's just starting out, to be able to invest in this kind of growth work with somebody who can not just help you plan and execute a career trajectory, but first spend a lot of time with you on these deeper self-awareness, personal development kinds of questions, to really fully understand and appreciate what those intrinsic strengths are and how to amplify them and manage the rest, is such a gift. It sets you up for so much success in life and will save you, I think, from another path that many people stumble into, is that they think they should be something that they're not, and try really hard to be that kind of person, and wind up getting in the wrong kind of career, the wrong kind of relationship, that ultimately winds up being a negative experience for them. Not negative, because I think all of our life experiences are valuable when growth is the result, right? So, spending 5 years in a career and being like, this is not for me. Because of that experience, you learn something really valuable about yourself. And there was also motivation generated to do something different. And that's fantastic. But if you're a young person listening to this, there is an easier way, just saying. And if you are like me, an older person or in midlife and listening to this, what my advice to you would be is to really get dialed in on, answering some of these questions, working either with a, career professional of the caliber that I was just talking about, or if you've noticed that your natural ways of being are maybe strengths for you in your chosen career path, but are showing up in ways that feel problematic in your relationships or in your lifestyle, in your health outcomes. I mean, like, whatever it is in your personal life. Again, I would invite you to get connected to a very powerful and experienced therapist who specializes in transformational coaching psychology. You do not want to connect with anybody who is going to pathologize you or be talking about all of the deficits because that really implies these are things that need to be corrected. These are things that are wrong with you that need to be healed, changed. Um, of course, if you do connect with a good therapist and discover that you do actually have a tendency towards something that can really be problematic, major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar, other mood disorders, a significant trauma history, do therapy. Evidence-based clinical mental health that is for the purpose of treating that, healing it, so that it does not become an obstacle that gets in the way of your being your best self and really being able to express all of these many strengths that you did have. So do therapy first. And if you've done that, or if in listening to this, you're pretty confident that it's really just a matter of identifying and building on your strengths to bring out your best, I would strongly encourage you to get connected with a therapist who provides coaching. Again, rare breed. Most providers of coaching don't have any training or qualifications at all. They just decided to be a coach. It's a completely unregulated field. And most therapists don't have any training or experience in coaching. So you're looking for somebody special who can take you into this on a deep level, but also help you do something really productive with it. That's just a pro tip. If you're interested on doing this work, like that's who to look for. In my own life, I've really benefited from somebody that has helped me see my blind spots and my differences that I was genuinely not aware of. I didn't know that I was doing these things or that I had mindsets about certain things or that my way of being was even different. I think it's very easy for us to all assume that we're more like others than we actually are. And so I think it's by working with a good growth partner that we can get this clarity that allows us to think about those self-management systems we all need to support our strengths and ultimately our success. What we're talking about here goes very deeply, and I think further down than what basic career coaching will provide. This goes past, taking the test to find out what your aptitudes and interests are. We're really going into a deep self-awareness, personal growth process with the goal of not just like figuring out what kind of life would support your strengths and protect you from blundering into predictable situations if you're not aware of your limitations. But what we're really talking about here is a powerful path to self-acceptance. When you're able to find a trajectory that supports your strengths, acknowledges the limitations, sets you up for success, protects you from failure, you're also able to find value in your pain points through this work. You can then begin to really cultivate a lot of appreciation and respect for yourself that can be extremely powerful and healing for a lot of people. It can change the way you see yourself through your own eyes. And then it can also change the way that other people see you. If you have had an internal narrative that is all about the things that I'm not, all the things that I do wrong and will always, mess up, whether you know it or not, you've been projecting that out into the world and people experience you that way. When you are able to create a different story for yourself that really highlights your strengths, your superpowers, what makes you special, and when you believe that and appreciate those things about yourself, that too radiates outwards. You tell people what to believe about you. And when you are projecting confidence and self-acceptance, you will experience your relationships as being more accepting and often more respectful and appreciative of you. So you'll have a nicer time in your relationships too. They'll be more satisfying for you because of doing this work. Choosing to operate within your strengths takes a lot of humility. It takes emotional maturity. It takes self awareness. And it also requires all of us, I think, to commit to a path which closes off other paths sometimes, saying, I shouldn't do that. That would be a waste of everybody's time and energy. But that's when you're really able to reach the fullness of your potential, is by focusing on those things. When you're saying no deliberately with great intention to things that will never be a strength for you, you're just releasing yourself from any expectation that they should be. You can say yes to the things that will bring so much energy, love, happiness, success, and growth into your life. Then, that also requires embracing some change. If you have been listening to this and recognizing that you have been living out of alignment with your real strengths, there's also a lot of growth work that needs to be done there, or that can be at least considered. And again, my advice is to work with a very, very good, therapist who specializes in transformational growth, to think about what kinds of internal, but sometimes also external changes you might consider making, how to embrace these so that you can begin intentionally designing a life where you can feel more successful, more empowered, and really like you're being your best self every day, because that is what you deserve. So other just little resources I'll drop here at the end. There are many different, assessments to help uncover strengths. Honestly, the best one that I have found, particularly for career, is the Gallup Strengths Finder. I am not a spokesperson for this company, but I've taken their assessments, had other people that I work with do so, and was really amazed at like the level of not just depth, but also accuracy that these things pull up, like kind of creepy. It's not cheap. I think you can expect to pay anywhere like 60-ish bucks to take this, but Gallup Strength Finder is super good. You might also consider taking the Enneagram. It doesn't go so much into personal strengths, but rather personal qualities. And it can be a really helpful tool in understanding both the light and the dark aspects of our nature, so that we can intentionally cultivate the best parts of ourselves. But again, this is data that helps us in the self-reflection, self-discovery process, but truly nothing can replace a relationship with somebody who really knows you well and who cares enough about you to help point out your blind spots for the purpose of growth, for your benefit. So not in a critical way, but rather a supportive way that promotes your growth. So, what would be different for you if you were fully aware of and committed to embracing your strengths and building a life around those strengths, and also fully aware of and taking responsibility for the aspects of yourself that were part of your strength, dark sides of your strength, but that do need to be responsibly managed? I'd like for you to just sit for a moment and imagine what this could be like for you. This work is not easy work, but it is worth it. So, if you've been beating yourself up, it's time to stop. It's time to lean in to all aspects of yourself. Your pathway into this might be through the things you don't like about yourself. That's okay. But then get to work. Figure out what those are, amplify your strengths, reframe your strengths, grow to appreciate them. And then once you've been building that new identity, it becomes a lot easier to change your self-concept and ultimately change your environment and change your life trajectory, is what we're talking about here. So it's exciting stuff, one of my favorite topics, and I hope that this was helpful for you today. And I will be so interested to hear what you do with this. If you've listened to this podcast, I'd love to hear what your takeaways were. You can leave them in the comments here. You can come over to our website, growingself.com. Obviously, leave them in the comments section. I always read those and respond to them. And of course, get in touch with me on social media. I'm around on Instagram at Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. I will write you back. And I'd love to hear more about what what's going on in your world and how I can be of service to you. And of course, if the process that I was describing sounded interesting to you and you thought, yes, I would like to have my very own personal partner in growth to do this with me, of course, you're always invited to come over to growingself.com and request a free consultation meeting with one of the therapists on my team. What we do is really different. I work with the most amazing, well educated, like really glowing, sparkly therapists, and they understand coaching psychology, and that is what they practice. And that's why the transformational growth work that we do at Growing Self is so special, I think, for the people that we seek to serve. And obviously, there's a time and a place for that kind of growth work. We talked about, the difference between clinical mental health and when that kind of coaching is appropriate. But if that sounds right for you, come visit. We're here for you. All right. Thanks for doing this with me, and I'll be back in touch next week. Take care.